I recorded this with Steve a few weeks ago or a month ago, depending on when we are at the Karsten trilogy of vampire movies from Hammer. And the one thing that we weren't able to do really a podcast on because there's no movie about is the unmade Vampirella Hammer movie. And Steve Haberman, film historian who's worked on a lot of Scream Factory films, and you've heard him on this podcast before, as well as Radio of Horror, is on the show with us to talk a little bit about what happened to this unmade Vampirella Hammer horror movie. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you should ask me that because I wrote my thesis for my PhD on the films that were written by Christopher Wicking and directed by Gordon Hessler. And one of them was supposed to be, for Hammer, Vampirella. So I was able to get 2 drafts of the screenplay of Vampirella, the 2 final drafts by Christopher Wicking, the screenwriter, from the De Montfort University Library in Leicester, England. And I read those, and I must say it's very good news for all of you that Vampirella was never made. It was 2 of the worst screenplays I ever read in my life. They were unfocused. The tone was crazy. It was, I don't know. It was pretty crazy. Remember, this was in 1974 or something like that. I think 74, and the executive producer was Michael Carreras, and he had just taken over Hammer, and he was racking his brain trying to think of something that he thought this man in his, late middle ages would appeal to what he thought was the young audience going to see movies. And like a lot of the middle-aged guys back in those days, he got it all wrong. And so you're very lucky not to have to sit through Vampirella.
Now, are these scripts worse than the Jim Wynorski movie that was on Showtime starring Talia Soto?
I don't know. I never saw that.
Oh, don't ever see it. Okay. If you want to know anything about it, you could. I did a fan commentary for it. I will send you a link. Was there anything in the scripts that even remotely resembled Vampirella? And I know you're not a comic book fan, but did you have any knowledge of Vampirella to be like, Jesus Christ, you can't get anything right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I remember Vampirella when it came out. I mean, you couldn't ignore that. The covers were great. But, yeah, it was, it started, it had like a prologue on her planet. What was it called? Draculoid or something like that, some planet that she was, and it had this whole story where all the water on her planet was blood, and then just before her planet explodes, somebody blows her planet up. She gets in some kind of spaceship and she comes to Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she, I believe, she landed in Bermuda, and she hooks up, not sexually, but she makes friends with a middle-aged magician.
Yep.
Like magician,
Pendragon, who is still pops up in the comics today. In fact, he Vampirella's continuity gets messed around a lot, but Vengeance of Vampirella is continuing the 1990s Vengeance of Vampirella comic book storyline 25 years later, and Pendragon has returned in that, mixed with another character, so he's like immortal because he's wearing the skin of this silver alien creature that used to hang around with Vampirella. Don't ask me to explain any more than that.
But yeah, what happens? Pendragon was going to be played by Peter Cushing.
Oh,
and that was really one of the reasons that the movie didn't get made, because they had finally Hammer made a co-production deal with American International Pictures, who had made the 4 previous Christopher Wicking screenplays to be directed by Gordon Hessler, which was The Oblong Box, Scream and Scream Again, Cry of the Banshee, and Murders in the Rue Morgue. AIP was insisting that a bigger star play Pendragon. They wanted, Rex Harrison or Marty Feldman or, who else did they want? They're just a whole crazy group of kind of random actors that they thought would be bankable to play this part. And none of them wanted to play it. They asked Danny Kaye. They asked a bunch of people. And nobody wanted to do it. And so the project stalled out right there, because they always wanted Hammer, Michael Carreras and Christopher Wicking, which was basically Hammer at the time. They always wanted Peter Cushing.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, it wouldn't have been awesome. It would have been sad for Peter Cushing.
Well, true, but who knows? I mean, I don't think that. I mean, once upon a time, you could say a movie was bad when it comes out. 30 years later, it's a cult classic. Now everyone's looking at like the work of Joel Schumacher as being the greatest thing of all time because the guy just died a month ago. But I'm just like, okay, Batman and Robin is still a terrible movie, people. Okay, The Lost Boys is a great movie. Batman and Robin is garbage.
But the thing about it is, time really does tell you what the great movies were. Some of those movies that were lauded when they came out as great are great. And many of the movies that were lauded at the time are crap. And many of the movies that were dismissed when they came out, time and a little bit of objectivity, we now know are great. Some are masterpieces. I mean, my favorite movie of all time is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. It was absolutely critically slammed when it came out. That Time magazine called it a Hitchcock and Bull story. It's the greatest, not just my favorite movie, it's been voted the greatest movie ever made, overtaking Citizen Kane by sight and sound of 5 or 10 years ago.
That's awesome. Thanks, Steve, because I've always wanted to know about that movie, and there's not a lot of information out there. All I keep seeing is coming soon, a major motion picture from Hammer, kind of like the canon Spider-Man movie, if you've ever seen, the advertisements for that, which never happened.
Well, that happens now more than ever.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's tons of great YouTube channels out there that go into, that get those, unmade scripts or whatever and talk, really dig deep into, hey, did you know that the guy who made Mad Max was going to make a Justice League movie in 2007, but the writer's strike destroyed that entire project. They had it fully cast and everything, and just before principal photography was supposed to happen, the movie got shelved. I'm waiting. I mean, we're still in the midst of it, but I'm still waiting for the number of projects that are going to come out from COVID-19 to announce that aren't going to happen, getting shelved, or completely and utterly, over with.
Yeah, it's a miracle when any movie gets made, because making a movie now with the death of the studios, when every movie is its own, it's like opening a business. It's like opening a restaurant. You got to get a lot of agreement, and you got to get a lot of financial backing with very little to promise up front. So, it's very, thank God for Netflix. I mean, that's the closest thing we have now to an operating movie studio.
Right.
But other than that, there's not much chance of anything going smoothly.
Real quick, what do you think of the new Hammer, the people using the Hammer name for films like The Lodge? Because a lot of people, they don't like those movies.
I do. I liked some of them. I didn't like others. I thought Let Me In was great. I thought The Woman in Black was good. Not as good as the TV movie version of Woman in Black that Nigel Neal did the script for, but it was good. I liked The Lodge. It was okay. It was enjoyable. I liked it. Some of them, like Wakewood, I hated. I didn't like The Residents. It's hit and miss, because they're making movies. They can call themselves Hammer. It's like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for horror films, but without Tony Hines, and Jimmy Sangster and Terrence Fisher, and God bless him, Michael Carreras. It's not Hammer, because Hammer was that chemistry of those guys, what they thought would work. Now they have a whole bunch of other executives, and at least they're trying to make gothic horror films. I appreciate that.
Definitely. Well, Steve, thank you for coming on to this episode to talk a little bit about the unmade Vampirella movie and your thoughts on the current state of Hammer films.
My pleasure. See you again.